Hello everybody and welcome back to the Engine House. I am your host, Gandy Dancer, and if you can plainly see, I am not in the Engine House today. I'm in the town offices in the town of Van Buren. I'll be giving a demonstration here shortly. This is all thanks to, of course, the town manager, Luke Dyer, who is floating around here somewhere doing other town business. In the meantime, we'll be starting shortly. I hope you enjoy. Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to this, and I'll say my usual on my YouTube videos. Welcome to the Engine House. I am your host, of course, Gandy Dancer, and I'm not in the Engine House. And we will go over, still trying to figure this stuff out. Gandy Dancers. It was a slang term used for early railroad workers when they would lay the track on the sleepers, which are, you and I know as railroad ties. They had a tool. This guy knows. They had a tool called a gandy, and the men would align the rails, and in the process of aligning the rails, they looked like they were dancing, and they collectively became known as gandy dancers. I like the term, so I stole it. Nowadays, everything's done with, automation. There's big machines that do that, all that stuff. The gandy dancers are long gone, at least in this country. My first railroad. My dad couldn't figure out how to get it in the basement, so I had to give it up. This is actually me right here. It's not showing up real well. This is 1975. That's 14-year-old me working as a candy butcher for the Wolfboro Railroad that ran between Wolfboro, New Hampshire and Salmondville, New Hampshire. This was a combine coach that started life as on the narrow gauge, and they converted it to standard gauge and put a motor in it somewhere in the 1800s. And over the years, it had 2 or 3 different motors in it, and then the Wolfboro Railroad crew got a hold of it and restored it. And they put a motor, of course, the motor, when they put it in, is in the baggage compartment, and you can see the radiator here. They also added controls at the other end. This thing is still around. Wolfboro Railroad, long gone. This is actually in the Strasburg Railroad Museum down in Pennsylvania now. It's been repainted with a different name, but it's still around. And that's where I got my start in model railroading. A lot of the old timers had model railroads, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I sold candy and postcards on this thing for a whole summer. Some of you guys, you may think, okay, it's a hobby for kids. I beg to differ. And this is only a sampling of some of the famous people who are into model railroads. Tom Hanks, Sir Elton John has a garden railroad. Rod Stewart, I'll get into him. Michael Jordan has N-scale. Winston Churchill. You can see a list of all of these people here. Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr. The 3 I have highlighted in red are my favorites, and I'll tell you why here. This is just a small sampling. I could have probably filled 3 more pages of famous people who were into model railroading. This guy, he knows. Frank Sinatra owned over $1 million worth of model railroad stuff, most likely Lionel and Louis Marks. Neil Young actually rescued Lionel. He owned Lionel Corporation for a while. He rescued them from oblivion. And my favorite, Rod Stewart. This guy, people who say, I don't have any time. When am I going to model railroad? When am I going to do this? Rod Stewart would go on tour. He would, in the city where he was going, he would reserve a suite of rooms. When he was not on stage or sleeping, he was building these buildings. He would then, after his tour, he would get back to his home and he would install these. He built 75% of his model railroad layout. He was featured in Model Railroader and Railroad Modeler and one other. And if you look up on YouTube, Rod Stewart Model Railroad, there's some videos there showing his layout. It is absolutely beautiful. Anyway, he is one of my favorites because he always seemed to find, when he was on tour, he was working on his model railroad when he wasn't on stage or sleeping. I don't know when the guy find time to eat, but that's, but he has an incredible, incredible layout. You look it up online, you'll find him there. How do you get started? Join a model railroad club. Sadly, there aren't any close by. I wish there were. Hobby shops that specialize in the hobby. Again, there aren't really any here in the area. I think the closest ones are down in Bangor, Portsmouth, that area. eBay. This is where I get a lot of my stuff. eBay has a lot, and if you're kind of handy with making stuff work, this didn't run. This was booked as a non-runner, and it does now. You can get this stuff running, and it's usually relatively inexpensive, and we'll get into the cost of some of this stuff nowadays as compared to what I pay here in a little bit. And then have a kind of a plan. What are you looking for in a layout? What do you want? Identify your interests, your era maybe. Early, steam, diesel, fantasy. My layout is pure fantasy, okay? And nothing on my layout is from any era whatsoever. I just do what I want on it. I have dragons. I have a moose that's gigantic. I have a few other things on there. Sci-fi, Western, or a mixture of all three. Maybe there's a particular rail line you like, or a town, maybe that had like this area, Boston and Aroostook, I think, or Aroostook and Bangor and Aroostook, thank you. Or even a mixed. So you can identify what you're interested in. Adventures in layout planning is create some drawing of the space you have, what you're looking for. Horseshoe, U, what have you got for size, and draw out a rough picture with dimensions of your base for your layout in your track plan. Develop a track plan. Do you want a rail yard? Do you want towns? Of course, everybody wants towns. What are you looking for? Are you going point A to point B? You want a loop? What kind of track plan are you wanting? And sit down, and there's also a lot of places online that can help you with developing a track plan. Decide a wiring. This is something I fell flat on my face when I got here. I found out later, after so many feet of Lionel track, you should run a feeder to it. I'm having problems with getting my trains to run completely around the track. I have to get back underneath it and run feeders and solder. So you want to make sure you have a wiring plan for running the trains, even HO, and any accessories you want. Where your wires are going to go, what's going to do what, how you're going to set it up, and we'll get into some of that here. Factors limiting the scale you wish to model. We have a lot. We have G, we have S, we have O, we have HO, we have N and Z, and there's a few in between. They're becoming popular. ON3, HON3. There's a new one out I've seen recently called TT. I have no idea how they make that thing work. It's tiny. And then, of course, you have these little guys, which I don't even know what scale that is, but if you like Thomas, there you go. See?
Do you have time for a question real quick?
Yes. Oh, that was one thing I was going to say. Is if you have questions, I know with me, I have a question and answer station at the end, but they go right out of your head. So go ahead.
When you were saying that the H and HO and all that, was that the size of the train, or is that what size track they would ride?
We'll get into that here in a second. I'll address that here in a minute. We'll talk about that. Your available space. Do you have a bedroom? Do you have a basement? There are also shelf layouts that are built on a shelf, and I go into that here. Your imagination. What do you got pictured in your head? What do you want to do with a layout? What are your interests? Again, it goes back to your interests. Scales and gauges. Scale is the size of your buildings. Gauge is the distance inside rail to inside rail. So when we talk about scale, I go by the Lionel, which is 148, which means 1 inch equals 48 inches. Gauge O is 1.25 inches, inside rail to inside rail. HO is a little different. It's 187 scale, and I forgot what it is in between the rails. There also is a couple other factors here that I'll dive into while we're doing this. This is O27. This is post-war. 1946 to 1964 was considered post-war era. The Lionel wanted trains that would go around a 27-degree radius turn, which is exactly what this is right here. These are actually little bit smaller than an actual O scale. You can see here, this is O27. This is a pre-war boxcar, 1930s to 1942. And this is a transition. This has this is about 1941, 1942. It has transition couplers on it from the old style to the new knuckle couplers. That's how come I know this is like 1940, late 41, early 42, before the war really got going. This is pre-war. This is post-war. You can see the difference in the size here. This is actual O. Not a lot bigger, but still bigger. This thing will barely go around some of my turnouts on my track. These go around just fine. This barely clears them. If I had an actual O-scale locomotive, no way it would go around my track. So when they talk O, there's O and there's O27. O27 is usually the post-war era, and I don't know exactly when they started switching over to actual O, but you can buy actual O-scale locomotives through Lionel now if you want to spend a small fortune. These are the 5 most popular gauges out there. We have G. This is a cheap battery-powered G scale, but they do have G scales that run on metal tracks with a controller, just like Lionel and HO. These are mostly used. This one here, again, is a kid's. I did this for my grandson. This originally was painted blue and said 102 Dalmatians all over it. I painted this up for my grandson. But these actual G scale is used mostly for garden railroads outside. The tracks will handle outside on a shelf outside, or like I think governors. Yes.
I've actually seen some videos about those garden railroads.
You did? You saw some videos on them? Yeah. I talk about them here too. They're a lot of fun if you got the time to do them. They really are. Anyway, this, I do not have any Z. I have no N. And again, there's a few in between now. There's an ON3, which I believe falls in right here. There's an HON3, which falls right in here. GO being the oldest. Lionel started that in 1909, I think, early 1900s. HO is the most popular. Everybody has HO. You can find 100 videos online on HO. I don't have any Z and I have no N. And again, there's a new one out, TT, that is really tiny. Here we go with layout types. You were talking garden railroad. Here's a garden railroad. Here's a diorama. This is a railroad. It doesn't go anywhere. It may be sitting on a shelf. It's just maybe, however big you want to make it. A building, a piece of track, some scenery, a train. It's still model railroading. Here's your frame style, which is one of the more popular ones. You build a frame, you have your track plan. Here's a simple oval. This is what I had when I first started at 14. I had a basically HO track on a piece of plywood on a couple of sawhorses in my basement. Stole a couple of my dad's sawhorses, stuck them down there. This is a shelf layout. If you don't have a lot of space, but you have wall space, this is 2 different shelf layouts here. Good for limited amount of room. And then a modular, this is usually reserved for clubs that do shows, like you were talking about going to a show. There were probably some modular railroads there. The club gets together, they build the modules, they're easy to transport. You ship them, you take them with you, you set them up, you do your show, you take them down and store them. Those are kind of the most popular ones I've seen. And this is an N scale in a suitcase. I've seen a few of these. They actually, and TT, I've seen TT in a box a lot smaller. Actually, we talk about skills here. You don't need to be an expert. Trust me. I fumble around. I haven't soldered anything since the 1980s when I was working on the guts of torpedoes. So my soldering skills absolutely stink, but they're getting better. When you're doing some of this stuff, you're going to need to solder wires or whatnot. Basic model painting. If you have any kind of painting skills whatsoever, if you like to paint, you'll be fine. There are also videos, different people who do this stuff. And again, I talk about them then a little bit later. All of this stuff you can learn as you go. You don't need to be any kind of an expert. You don't have to have, an art degree. Just have fun with it. Buildings and scenery. Again, different types here. We got some probably a river or a lake or even the ocean, mountains, rivers. You don't have to be an expert at any of this stuff. You learn as you go. You get better as you go. That's the whole point of this. This is some of my stuff. My trees. My first attempt at a pine tree that's bigger than one of these. And you can see again, fantasy, right? I've got dragons on my layout. I got a big, huge moose here. I've got some of these smaller trees. These are actually, they had snow on them. I bought a whole box of these things on Amazon, and they for Christmas. And you take them and soak them a little bit in some warm water, get the snow off. Take a pair of scissors and kind of whack them up a little bit to make them not look quite so much like a perfect tree. And then I put on what's called flocking. It's a material that comes, Woodland Scenics has it. It's for grass, it's for ground cover, and it's also for this kind of stuff. I use sawdust, believe it or not. I have a couple of videos online where I show I'm making my ground cover. All of this ground cover you see here is sawdust. And even the stuff in the pine trees is sawdust. This is foam. This is a combination of sawdust, and this is kind of, I'm not real happy with this tree. It was my first attempt, but my wife insisted on taking a picture of it. I have to redo some of this. This is actually a branch off a real tree that looks similar, and I added a couple extra branches, and I'm trying this, and this is, the base comes out of a pillow, also used polyfiber fill. And then I spray on glue and colored sawdust. Paint, water mixed, and put it in the oven at 200 degrees until it's dry. And what's that? Yes, exactly, till it's tender. And then I put it aside, and then I sift it through depending on what, I have a couple of sifts that screen you use for flour, for sifting flour, to get different sizes of the sawdust. And then I just spray the spray-on glue adhesive I use, and I just sprinkle it on and let it dry. And again, this was my first attempt, and it needs a little work. That's my first attempt at a pine tree, and it needs a little work too, but we're getting there. This is my layout right here. This is what, oh, also, if you have a cat, they make layouts so much more fun. They do. They're also, this is Shop Kitty. I call her Shop Kitty. If I'm down there in the shop, she is down there with me. And if I happen to be running trains, she is chasing them. She absolutely loves to. You can see my layout is pure fantasy here. The headwaters right here. These are two baby heads I've taken, made them look like granite rock, put them here. There's eventually going to be a waterfall here and a pool. You can almost see these are feet that came off of the babies. These are the foothills. Okay. I have fun with my layout. I have a lot of fun with it. If I don't take life too seriously, I have a lot of fun. Over here, there's a way out of scale T-Rex skeleton that they're excavating that I need to finish painting up. I'm currently working from here over, and then I have a mountain that sits here that isn't in the picture, and I'm slowly going to be painting the background and whatnot here. These are some of my HO buildings that I have done before my wife handed me her dad's set and said, "Here, have this." And then I fell down the rabbit hole of O scale. So it can be a lot of fun. Some days, all of this, by the way, is insulating foam, stacked and glued, and the covering to make it look like granite. I make my own, it's called Sculpt-A-Mold. I make it myself using plaster of Paris and the egg cartons that eggs come in, the cardboard ones. I grind those up fine, a cup of egg carton and a cup of plaster of Paris and enough water to make it, you can apply it. And I apply it and then I let it dry and then we start painting it. And I wish I had taken a picture of this side right here. Again, with painting skills, you can see my complete mess up right here on this side, and I got better as I went this way. But again, you get better as you go. You don't have to be perfect at this. I try to tell people on my videos, if you're happy with it, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. If you're happy with it. You can see I'm also still running track here. I have another opening here I have to work on. Here are some of the people that I watch. There are probably hundreds of others. You type in model railroading in YouTube and you're going to find hundreds, all different scales, all different, skill levels. Jason Jensen has an art degree. He started his layout 4 years ago. If you watch some of his earlier videos, you'll learn a lot about painting from his earlier videos. He really is good at what he does, and he explains it to where anybody can try it. Anybody can do it. Marklin of Sweden, he's over in, of course, Sweden, and he does a lot of videos on his scenery and detailing cars and rolling stock and things like that. Foss Scale Models, Doug Foss. He also has a kind of a combination shelf layout, small. I think it's only about 2 feet wide and runs maybe 12 or 15 feet in his basement. That's the size of his layout. Him and Jason, they also have building kits for sale. And I'll get into that. You have a number of different kits and things you can do scenery-wise, and I should have gone over that before I moved on. These are Hawthorne Christmas buildings for your Christmas scenes. I've taken these and painted them up, and I like fall. I've repainted them. Where the snow was, I added leaves, and I've repainted them. These are, give or take, anywhere between HO and O scale, depending on the size of the building. This is the barn. This is called a building flat. You can see it's very narrow. This would go up, this gives your layout depth. This would go up against a wall where your track, so you're not just having a blank wall there, you're having a little depth to your layout. It makes the layout look like it's going back a little ways further. We have a different types of kits here and different things you can do. This right here I completely scratch built this. It's very delicate. I don't really like moving it. And again, my fantasy layout, this is Hansel and Gretel Confectionaries. That started life. That's what this started life as. This, I forgot what this was. This is its furnace room. The corrugated metal here on the side. For your coffee cups. I trim it down, glue it on, rust it up, make it look kind of rusty and old, and there you have your metal siding. The roofs are, I use very fine blacks, the wet sanding sandpaper to give it a little bit of a texture. You can also use black construction paper, does the same thing. Dirty it up a little bit, make it look kind of old, and that's more of the foam. Painted to look like cement, a loading dock. This here, some of these kits, again, buying kits and things. You can buy expensive wooden kits. These online, 1950s, a few bucks. You can dress these up. There's a Plasticville kit right here, basic kit, nothing fancy. This is probably 70s or 80s, I'm gonna say. This is what it looks like now. I added a room to the back, added a porch, I painted it. This is kind of in memory of my time off grid. That's me and my wife sitting in our off-grid cabin, reading the paper on the porch. There's a lot of things you can do. These, my son actually bought two of these. One for his son and one for me. And I don't remember what he spent, but I think the kit was like about $10 a piece or something. So it wasn't too bad. These are really cheap and they go up in cost from there. You can buy expensive wooden kits that you're going to spend. These guys, a small kit like this is going to run you about 60 bucks. A bigger kit's going to run you, Doug Foss has a kit of the year that comes out, and it's a good size kit, but it's about 400 bucks average. If you've got that kind of money, that's great. The same thing with when I was talking earlier about your trains. This is probably the newest I have. This is from my time in the Navy. This is a commemorative set, U.S. Navy, 2012. I forgot what I spent for that. I think I spent 40 bucks for this as a non-runner. If you were to buy the same locomotive in O scale today, you're going to spend 2,500 bucks for it. It's ridiculous. HO, you're looking at a little better than that. Some of your rolling stock. This, by the way, Menards. You go online to Menards. They're a store out west, kind of like, they sell a little bit of everything. But they also have O scale, real O. And they have a lot of cars. This is my grandson's. I borrowed it for today. These are not bad. I think I got these for 3 of them for, let's say, you remember what I paid for these? 3 of them maybe came to 100 bucks, I think. Brand new.
The 3 came together.
Yeah, they came together. Menards also occasionally will come out with an O-scale locomotive, and they go fast. They come out, they're like $200, $300 for an A unit and a B unit like this in actual O, and they're sold out within 2 days. And they don't come out with another one. Every few months, they'll come out with a set, and they sell out. This is my S. This is an American Flyer set, came with 7 cars. You should have seen it when I bought it. I paid $15 at a thrift shop for the whole mess. This thing was so rusty. It was covered. It was an absolute disaster. and I took it apart and cleaned it. I don't even know if it runs because I have no S-scale track, but I had to rescue it. I couldn't see it sitting in a box, rotting away in a thrift store, so I grabbed it. But I paid $15 at a thrift shop. Sometimes Goodwill Finds will have O scale and HO scale. The only problem with them is you got to look when you go to buy something. It may be cheap, but you got to look at the shipping cost. I found a really nice locomotive I really liked at Goodwill Finds. Clicked on it, put it in my cart, went to finish buying it, and the shipping cost was almost $100. I said, nope, and I backed out. Yes?
Say if you got a first, how do you know what scale it is?
Okay, again, it goes back to your gauge. These look pretty close in size. Generally, the old American Flyers are S. You can judge by the size of. Sometimes they'll tell you online if it's S or if it's O. If you're unsure, you can ask. Online's a little harder than it is if you're actually in the thrift store, but you can see the difference in size underneath if you can actually pick them up. The width between your drivers there. And sometimes online they'll tell you if you're unsure. You can ask. Most of the time they'll say something, but sometimes they won't have anything listed there. There's been a few that have had combined, and they'll just say vintage trains. I don't touch those because I don't know what scale they are. I have no idea what they are. Also, there is Lionel O, and Lewis Marks came out a few years later with his own O scale. It's not as popular as Lionel, but it is O scale. A lot of people collect them. If you see something listed as vintage Marks, if you like the style, like it, it'll run on Lionel track. It'll run on the same exact. It's O scale. It'll run exactly like the rest of these will. So you have a very big variety of what you're wanting, what you like. I prefer Lionel over Lewis Marks just because I like the looks of it. It just depends on what you're looking for. Again, this is...
You'd have to measure the...
You'd have to measure between the drivers to know what size for sure you're getting. If it's something like this and it's packaged with 3-rail, you can rest assured it's probably O scale. If S is usually 2-rail, HO is 2-rail, G is definitely 2-rail. 3-rail is pretty much indicative of O, anything O scale. So if it's packaged with it, you can pretty much tell right away. These get their power from these pickups right here. Power comes in through here and it goes in or it goes out or vice versa. Your center rail is power and one of your outside rails is how these draw their power to run. Whereas HO, oh, the cab on that, just 2-rail. Your power goes in, comes out, same rail on each rail. It runs through the motor that way. S, you can see there's no pickups in the center. So S is pretty similar to HO as for how it runs on the rails. It'll draw its power from the 2 side rails. This guy, he draws his power from a battery. And I include him because what I'd like to say is, hush you. What I'd like to say is, especially, and even if you have something like this with the track system, you're still model railroading. You can add to it, you can take away from it. If that's what you like, that's what you do. If this is what you like, this is what you do, or a combination of all of them. It really doesn't matter. I know some people that have HO with their O as, say, would be maybe a small narrow gauge logging operation or a tourist type thing. for kids or something on their layout. It might be just a simple loop at a fair, for instance. They would do something like that. So you can have a combination of different things on your layout. It just depends on what you're wanting to do. And
maybe one more stage down, the little wooden trains that kids start out with. I remember my son, he had a huge table that we bought him, the little wooden trains that you pushed around.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right. And that reminds me also, if you like Legos, you type in Lego model railroading. Oh my God, there's a guy I watch. He has, I don't know how much money he has tied up in this thing, but he has a Lego castle. He has Lego track, Lego locomotives, Lego rolling stock. And he buys new stuff all the time. He's constantly adding to this thing. And it's fun to watch it, but I don't know how much money he spends. But that's what he likes. He likes Lego. And it's all his thing. That's what he likes to do. And I think the guy's probably in his 20s or 30s or something like that, but he just absolutely loves Lego and he just has a blast with it. And finally, if you have a cat, again, expect this kind of stuff. I was putting this building, I did not bring it today. It's a little delicate. It's a bakery that I had built, and it's also built out of
You want to tell them the names of these?
Yeah, this turned out to be Granny and Red's bakery for Red Riding Hood.
Bakery and delicatessen.
Bakery and delicatessen. Thank you. My wife here keeps me on track. But I was putting this, and I was waiting. One of the things you're going to find with model railroading is you're always waiting for either paint or glue or both to dry. Or in my case, sometimes it's the Sculpt-A-Mold I've just put on the side. That takes 24 hours before you can do anything to it. So once you get to that point, it's like, now what? You know, you got to wait. And I was waiting for stuff to dry. And of course, then she curled up and took a nap.
Waiting for it to dry too.
Yeah, she.